You talk too much. That's your problem. You think noise means power, that loud words fix wounds, that explanations bring peace. But let me tell you something. Silence is stronger than the loudest scream. When you're quiet, they don't know what you're thinking. They don't know if you're broken or building a bomb. And that scares them. That's the beauty of silence. It becomes the threat they never saw coming. You gave them your voice before, didn't you? Gave them your truth, your heart, your time. You bled stories, and they drank it like wine, clapped while you cried, and turned it into entertainment. And when they were done, they tossed you aside like you were noise they grew tired of. But now you shut up, now you watch, now you let your silence choke them. Let it echo louder than your explanations ever did. They don't deserve your voice. They don't deserve your vulnerability. And every time you stay silent, every time you hold back what you once gave so freely, you rise a little higher. That's how you kill them. Not with words, but with the absence of them. You think they'll change if you just explain enough, huh? If you just tell them what hurt you, how much you gave, how real your intentions were. You think they'll finally get it, that they'll snap out of their selfish fog and realize you mattered. But people like that, they don't listen to pain. They watch consequences. They only feel your worth after your silence walks away and takes the warmth with it. So stop talking. Stop begging for understanding. Stop narrating your heartbreak to deaf ears. You think that's strength? That spilling your soul to someone who left it bleeding is bravery? No, that's desperation. That's you clinging to ghosts, hoping they remember who you were. But let me give it to you straight. They already forgot. The moment they chose someone else, they rewrote you. So now it's your turn to rewrite yourself in silence. Let your actions slap louder than your speeches. Let your success become the eulogy of the loyalty they buried. They're watching, even when they pretend they're not. They hear about you. They see your name pop up. They stalk your stories in the dark, hoping to find signs you're still stuck. And every time you're silent, truly silent, you poison their comfort. You make them wonder. You drive them mad, because silence is mystery, and mystery is power. When you're loud, you're predictable. But when you're quiet, you're dangerous. That's what they fear. Not what you say, but what you're planning. Not what they see, but what they don't. So give them nothing. No reaction, no closure, no hint. Let them feel the burn of being ignored by someone they once underestimated. Let them sit in that silence and rot in their confusion. That's how you win. Not by shouting your value, but by becoming so silent they hear it in every corner of their conscience. You ever notice how the loud ones always fall first? The ones who bark, scream, post, cry for attention. They crack under pressure like glass dressed as steel. But the silent ones, they're different. They don't need applause. They don't need sympathy. They sit with their pain, carve it into power, and wait. You've been too loud for too long, explaining yourself to people who already made their judgment, trying to convince people who never saw your worth in the first place. And what did it bring you? Exhaustion, disrespect, regret. You handed them your voice, and they used it against you. Turned your softest truths into weapons. That's what people do. They don't love deeply. They consume deeply. And once they're full, they spit you out. So now you sit in the shadows. Not because you're weak, but because you're focused. Silence is not surrender. It's preparation. It's the war cry before the storm. While they talk, you build. While they laugh, you sharpen. And when the time is right, you strike. Not with noise, but with results. That's the language they'll understand. You think they care about your side of the story? They don't. People pick sides before they even hear facts. You could bleed the truth in front of them, and they'd still blame you. That's the world we live in. Image matters more than intention. Rumors travel faster than reality. So why waste breath correcting people who are committed to misunderstanding you? Let them talk. Let them lie. Let them paint their fake pictures. Every second you spend defending yourself is a second you're not evolving. And trust me, they want you stuck. That's why they poke at you, drag your name, try to bait you into reacting. Because a reaction is a gift. It means you still care. It means they still have access to your peace. Take that away. Be untouchable. Be silent. Let the silence remind them that they lost access to your soul. Let it ring louder than all their noise combined. Let it be your revenge. Not in anger, not in chaos, but in calm, calculated indifference. That's the ultimate punishment. Being nothing to someone who once had everything from you. You remember all those nights you stayed up, typing long messages, crying to the walls, pacing around trying to figure out what went wrong. Remember how you begged for clarity, for closure, for just one honest conversation? And what did you get? Silence. Or worse, half-truths, blame, gaslighting. They didn't just leave, they made you feel like you were the problem. Like loving them too much was your flaw. Like caring too deeply was your weakness. But now it's your turn to be silent. Not out of pettiness, but out of growth, out of survival. Because every time you stay quiet, every time you swallow a response, every time you ignore that itch to speak, you win, you heal, you reclaim your power. Let them wonder why you stopped talking. Let them sit in their guilt. Don't explain your silence. Don't break your own peace just to feed their curiosity. The old you would have begged for attention. The new you doesn't even look their way. That's evolution. That's cold power. They always come back, not because they loved you, but because they realize what they lost. And when they do, they'll test the waters. A simple, hey, a random memory, a fake apology. But don't you dare open the door. They weren't sorry when you needed them. They were silent when you cried. They were absent when you begged. And now that you've found peace, now that you've stopped talking, they miss the noise. They miss the access. But silence isn't a pause. It's a boundary. You don't go back to what broke you. You don't reward betrayal with a second chance. You let them sit outside, knocking on a door that no longer opens. That's how you teach them. Not with anger, but with absence. Not with arguments, but with elevation. Keep rising, keep building, keep walking, and let your silence be the echo of your strength. You know what silence really is? It's the graveyard of everything they thought you'd say. Every insult they threw your way, every lie they spread, every time they doubted you, they expected a reaction. They wanted chaos, screaming, breakdowns. That's how small people operate. They throw fire and wait for you to burn yourself, proving them wrong. But when you say nothing, when you just vanish into your grind, into your transformation, into your evolution, they don't know what to do with that. It messes with their mind. Because silence isn't just the absence of noise, it's a mirror. It forces them to face what they did without your voice softening the blow. No more explanations, no more, but I meant well, no more giving them the benefit of the doubt. Let the silence rot them from the inside. Let it remind them of every time you were there and they didn't appreciate it. Let it haunt them. You gave them everything once. Now give them nothing. They earned that. They'll call you heartless now. Cold, distant, changed. And they're right. You did change. Because pain has a way of carving out the weak parts of you. It burns off the softness, leaves only bone and focus. You loved with your chest wide open, but all it got you was betrayal. You gave them the warmest parts of you, and they left you in the cold. So now, you speak in silence. You move in shadows. You don't need to explain why you're distant. They know. Deep down, they know. That's why they talk about you behind closed doors. That's why they stalk you in secret. Because silence carries a weight louder than any scream. It tells them you're done, not angry, not bitter, just done. And that's the scariest version of you. Not the one that yells, but the one that no longer reacts. The one who disappears and turns his back without a word. That's not weakness. That's war strategy. That's silence used as a blade. You think being silent is easy? Hell no. It's torture. Because everything in you wants to scream, to fight back, to remind them of who the hell you are. But that's the trap. That's the bait. They want you to ruin your reputation defending yourself. They want you to seem unstable, emotional, broken, so they can justify the lies they told about you. But when you say nothing, you deny them that satisfaction. You force them to confront their own guilt. They tell everyone you changed, and they're right. You evolved. You got tired of being the only one carrying the weight of loyalty. So now you carry yourself. You put that energy into your goals, your body, your business, your peace. That's the silence that screams, not the one hiding from pain, but the one rising because of it. Let them think you're heartless. Better that than being the fool who keeps explaining pain to people who caused it. See, silence makes people uncomfortable because it gives them space to think. And when they think, they remember. They remember the nights you were there for them, the days you picked up their broken pieces, the loyalty you gave when you had nothing to gain. And all of a sudden, your silence becomes noise in their mind, a constant reminder of what they lost. So don't break it. Don't ruin the lesson by speaking. Don't reply to the texts. Don't engage in the drama. Don't explain your peace to people who thrive on chaos. Let your silence speak for you. Let your absence be the loudest presence they've ever felt. That's not petty. That's justice. You're not seeking revenge. You're letting life show them. Because while they wasted time playing with your heart, you built an empire of peace. And that's the loudest message you could ever send. You know what's funny? They thought your silence meant you had nothing left to say, like you were empty, broken, defeated. But the truth is, silence is what happens right before the storm. It's not weakness, it's restraint. The silence of a man who's seen too much, felt too much, and finally realized that words are wasted on the blind. You used to explain yourself to people who weren't even listening. You broke your own heart, trying to justify your intentions to liars. You drained your own soul, trying to prove your worth to people who never planned on valuing it. And when they left, they expected noise, tears, breakdowns, emotional outbursts they could mock later. But you gave them silence. And that silence, that's the part they didn't see coming. That's the power they forgot you had. You took every word you would have said, every scream you would have let out, and you forged it into fuel. That's what silence does. It teaches you to build instead of beg. People fear silence because it doesn't give them control. When you talk, they know what you're thinking. They twist your words. They flip your meaning. They spin their narrative. But when you're silent, they have nothing to use against you. No weakness to exploit. No anger to provoke. No pain to feed off. And that drives them insane. Because silence forces them to deal with the echo of their own choices. They sit in the quiet, hoping for a sign, a slip, a reaction. But you give them none. That's strength. That's power. That's the cold lesson they never thought they'd learn from you. You're not silent because you have nothing to say. You're silent because they don't deserve to hear what's become of you. because who you're becoming can't be explained. It can only be shown in silence, through results, through presence, through the undeniable glow of someone who turned betrayal into building blocks. And don't let anyone guilt you into speaking. Don't let anyone tell you that staying silent means you're cold or cruel. You were warm once. You were soft. You were loud in your loyalty, loud in your care, loud in your effort. But they drained that out of you, piece by piece, until the only thing left was the quiet. And from that quiet, you found peace. So now, when they say, "You've changed," you say nothing. When they ask, "What happened to you?" you say nothing. Because the real ones, they already know. And the fake ones, they don't deserve the answer. You don't owe anyone an explanation for your healing. You don't need to explain your boundaries to people who cross them. You don't need to narrate your journey to those who mocked your struggle. Your silence is your statement. It says, "I saw it all. I felt it all. And I'm still here. Stronger, colder, sharper. And you? You're no longer part of this chapter." You ever see how they panic when the one they overlooked starts glowing in silence? How they start reaching out again? How suddenly they remember your worth? But it's not because they care. It's because they lost their grip. They used to control you with words, praise, guilt, manipulation. Now, they have nothing. And nothing scares people more than losing control over someone they underestimated. So they'll call you distant. They'll try to bait you into a conversation. They'll pretend to be curious, but don't fall for it. Don't water the dead garden. Don't speak life into things that only ever drained you. Let the silence be the wall they can't climb. Let it be the reminder that some bridges weren't burned. They were never meant to be crossed again. And as you rise, quietly, powerfully, don't look back. Keep your footsteps silent. Let the noise come from your results. That's how legends are made. Not in the noise, but in the silence that follows the fall. You remember how they used to act like they were doing you a favor just by being in your life? Like your loyalty was something disposable. Like your time was cheap? Yeah. They forgot who they were dealing with. They forgot that the quietest ones are always the most dangerous. Because the loud ones, they scream to hide their weakness. But the silent ones, they already made their decision. They're just waiting for the perfect moment to act. That's you now. You're not broken. You're calculating. You're focused. You're done begging for respect. You're done lowering your worth for people who couldn't even meet your bare minimum. You've seen enough fake smiles, heard enough empty words, been betrayed enough times to know that silence is the only real answer left. Not because you're bitter, but because talking was a luxury they no longer deserve. You were gold, and they treated you like rust. Now let them sit in the silence and remember what it felt like to be around someone who truly gave a damn. And you know what makes silence so loud? It's what it exposes, because in silence, their lies echo back at them. The truth they tried to bury starts rising to the surface. Their guilt grows teeth. That's why they want you to speak to Meshach, to mess up, to say something they can use against you, to break the power of your silence. But don't. Stay quiet. Let your growth speak for itself. Let your absence do the damage. There's nothing louder than the silence of someone who stopped caring. Nothing heavier than the silence of someone who finally realized their own worth. You used to fight to stay in their life. Now, you fight to protect your own peace. And that's the shift they can't handle. They're not mad because you're silent. They're mad because they don't have access to you anymore. You closed the door, and this time, you locked it with discipline, not emotion. Let them bang on it. Let them scream. Let them regret. You keep building. You keep winning quietly. They'll pretend they don't care. They'll act like your silence doesn't affect them. But silence leaves room for reality. And reality always hits harder when there's no noise to distract from it. When you go silent, they're left alone with everything they didn't want to face. The way they used you, the way they dismissed you, the way they took you for granted. That silence, it becomes their punishment. It becomes their mirror. And when they look into it, they don't see you. They see their mistakes, their pride, their arrogance. That's the lesson. That's the justice. Not revenge, not drama, just distance, just peace. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to post quotes or play mind games. You've already won the moment you decided to stop giving explanations to people committed to misunderstanding you. Let them think what they want. Let them say what they want. That's silence. That's the sound of your standards being enforced. And here's what they'll never admit. Your silence scares them because it's unfamiliar. It's not the version of you they're used to. You were the fixer, the overthinker, the one who reached out first, the one who stayed up late just to make sure things were okay. But that you, that version died the day you realized your voice was being wasted. The day you saw the messages go ignored. The day your effort was met with indifference. That's the day the silent version of you was born. And he's not to be played with. He's the one who knows his worth, who walks away with dignity, who doesn't explain his value to those too blind to see it. That version of you, he's the one they'll fear because they can't control him. He doesn't yell, he doesn't beg, he disappears. And in his absence, they realize the truth. The silence they once mocked has now become the consequence they can't escape. They'll talk about your silence like it's the problem, like you're distant, like you're arrogant, like you changed for the worse. But the truth is, your silence is the cure. It's what's saving you from drowning in cycles you've already outgrown. You used to talk because you believed in people. You believed in second chances, believed in explaining yourself, fixing things, making it right. But now you've seen what all that explaining gets you. Drained, disrespected, and dismissed. So you stop talking, not because you don't care, but because you finally do, about yourself. You realized not every fight is worth your breath. Not every person deserves your voice. And the moment you stopped pouring into others and started pouring into yourself, everything changed. That silence became sacred, peaceful, powerful. It gave you time to think, to heal, to plan. And while they were busy running their mouths, trying to understand the new you were already 10 steps ahead, growing in silence, winning in silence. See, silence teaches you things that noise never could. In the quiet, you hear your own thoughts, raw, unfiltered, honest. You face your demons. You sit with the pain they left you in. And little by little, that silence turns into strength. You stop looking for closure. You stop needing explanations. You start realizing that not every door needs to be reopened. Some need to stay closed, sealed shut with the lessons they taught you. That's what silence does. It gives you clarity. It strips away the illusions. And what's left? Just you and the truth. The truth that you were never the weak one. That loving too deeply wasn't your mistake. That your loyalty wasn't foolish. The only mistake you made was giving it to people who never deserved it. And now, your silence is your reset. Your reset from chaos, from manipulation, from people who only came around when they needed something. Your silence is your line in the sand. And once it's drawn, it doesn't get crossed again. They'll keep testing you. Don't doubt it. They'll come back dressed in guilt, decorated with fake maturity. They'll try to reopen conversations with half-assed apologies, hoping you still have a soft spot. But the thing about silence, it burns bridges quietly. No flames, no explosions, just a clean break. So when they come back, trying to sneak into your peace with the same old patterns, you won't need to raise your voice. You won't need to explain why they're no longer welcome. Your silence will say it all. It'll say, you had your chance. It'll say, I'm not the same person you left behind. It'll say, I don't entertain disrespect twice. And the best part, they'll feel that message deep. Because people always feel your absence louder than they ever felt your presence. That's the irony. When you gave them everything, they barely noticed. But now that you're silent, now that you're gone, they can't stop thinking about you. That's your power. Use it. You don't need revenge. You don't need to prove them wrong with arguments or posts or petty responses. All you need is silence and progress. Let your growth be so loud it echoes through the silence. Let your glow remind them of everything they threw away. Let your calmness be the storm they didn't prepare for. Because in silence, you build the best kind of legacy. The kind that doesn't need validation. The kind that doesn't need to be loud. The kind that speaks for itself. So keep your head down. Keep working. Keep healing. Keep cutting off anything that makes your soul feel small. And if they ever ask why you're so quiet now, why you're so cold, just smile. Smile. And walk away. Because nothing says, "I've outgrown you," louder than silence, backed by success. That's your final word. Not said out loud, but lived in every step you take without them. They'll tell the story their way. They'll twist the truth. Paint themselves as the victim. Make you out to be the villain who went cold, who vanished, who stopped caring. But you know what really happened. You cared too much, for too long, for too little in return. You gave second chances to people who didn't even deserve a first. You stayed loyal in rooms full of snakes. You listened when no one listened back. And what did they do with all that loyalty? They mistook it for weakness. They thought your patience had no limit, your silence had no teeth. But silence is a weapon, sharp, deliberate, lethal. And now that you've gone silent, now that you've pulled back every ounce of energy they used to feed on, they're starving. Starving for your attention, your validation, your reaction, but you won't give it. Because you finally learned some people only respect what they can't reach. And your silence? That's the distance they can't cross. They think silence is emptiness. But silence is full. Full of the words you chose not to say, the truths they didn't deserve to hear, the forgiveness they'll never receive. It's heavy with all the lessons you had to learn the hard way. Silence carries every sleepless night, every ignored message, every moment you swallowed your pride just to keep the peace. And now, that peace belongs to you, not to them. You're no longer available for conversations that drain your soul. You're not here to explain your worth to people who treated you like a placeholder. The silence you've chosen is sacred. It's your boundary, your shield, your rebirth. It's how you rise without noise. And the best part? They can't ignore it. They can't block it. They can't unhear the silence of someone they thought they'd broken. That's the part that eats at them. Because silence is louder than any scream once it comes from a person who's finally done. They'll try to provoke you through silence breakers, through the mouths of others. They'll poke, prod, and whisper. They'll say things meant to sting, to pull you back into the chaos. But don't. Don't even flinch. Don't give them the satisfaction. You've already risen above it. And rising above means choosing silence over smallness. choosing focus over gossip, peace over pettiness. They want you loud and emotional because that's the version of you they could manipulate. But this new you, the one who speaks less, reacts less, explains nothing, that version scares them. That version isn't owned by anyone. That version isn't led by pain, but by purpose. That version doesn't need to say a word, because everything is already written in his silence, carved into his focus, radiating from the peace that no one can touch anymore. You want revenge? Let me tell you how real revenge works. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's not public. It's you thriving in silence. You, surrounded by real ones who get you. You, no longer flinching at the thought of what they did, but smiling at how far you've come. Revenge is waking up without anxiety. Revenge is not needing closure anymore. Revenge is looking at the same world that once tried to break you and not feeling a damn thing. That's real power. That's silence turned into success. So if you ever doubt whether staying silent was the right choice, remember this. The loudest person in the room is usually the weakest, but the one who sits still, watches, learns, builds, that's the one who owns the room. That's who you are now. Silent, but unstoppable. Quiet, but undeniable. That's your story now, and it doesn't need to be told. It'll be felt. You ever think about how many times you gave people pieces of yourself they didn't even earn? How many chances you handed out like they were free candy, hoping that maybe, just maybe, they'd treat you better if they just understood you more? But they never did. Because people don't value what they don't work for. And you were too easy to reach, too available, too loud with your love, too loud with your loyalty. They knew exactly where to find you when they needed something, and exactly how to disappear when you needed them back. That's why your silence now is suffocating to them. Not because they care about your pain, but because they lost their free access. They lost the version of you who kept showing up. And now, all they've got is the echo of the voice they took for granted. That silence, that's your final message. It says, I've seen enough. I've learned. I'm not coming back. And the best part is, it says it without a single word. You're not punishing anyone by being silent. You're protecting yourself. You're preserving your energy. You're filtering your life from the noise that used to drain you. The old you would have argued, cried, begged, sent paragraphs trying to explain the ache. But now, you don't owe anyone that level of access. You're not here to perform your pain just to be seen. You're not here to educate people on how to treat you. You're silent because the lesson has already been taught. By their actions, by your response, by your disappearance. You gave them the test, and they failed. You gave them the map, and they still got lost. You gave them the gift, and they smashed it. So now, you give them silence. Cold, clean, unbreakable silence. The kind that doesn't beg for understanding. The kind that doesn't need revenge. Just peace, pure, ruthless peace. That's your closure. That's your victory. And here's the truth nobody wants to admit. Silence exposes the fakes. When you go quiet, the real ones step closer. They check in. They show up. They feel the shift and ask why. But the fakes, they get offended. They start rumors. They say you've changed, that you've gone cold, that you think you're better now. And they're right. You did change. You had to. You evolved to survive in a world that fed off your noise but gave you nothing in return. Silence became your defense. Not against them, but for yourself. Because you're not meant to keep bleeding for people who keep watching you suffer without lifting a hand. You're meant to rise, to cut off the noise, to remove your presence from any space that made you feel small. That's what silence does. It cleans the room. It leaves behind only what's real. And suddenly, the circle gets smaller. The nights get quieter. But your soul gets louder. Peace replaces chaos. Power replaces desperation. Let them talk. Let them wonder. Let them lie. Your silence doesn't owe them clarity. You don't owe them proof of your pain or a press release about your progress. The ones who matter will feel it. Not in words, but in the way you move now. You walk different, talk less, smile with purpose. And when they look at you and ask, "What happened to you?" you give them nothing. Because if they wanted to know the real answer, they wouldn't have had to ask. They would have been there through it. They would have seen the damage. They would have witnessed the shift, but they weren't. So now they don't get the privilege of your explanation. Let your silence remain their punishment. Let it stretch out like a shadow over everything they ruined. Because this time, you're not coming back with words. You're coming back with results. And they're not ready for that. They thought your silence was surrender. But it was survival. It was you pulling your soul out of places it didn't belong. It was you rebuilding in private what they tried to break in public. They never understood how much it took for you to finally shut up. Because silence doesn't come easy to someone who used to fight for every connection, who used to bleed honesty and wait for people to do the same. You weren't born silent. You were made silent by every unanswered message, every fake apology, every time you showed up for people who let you down without blinking. That silence was earned, brick by brick, disappointment by disappointment. And now it's the only thing that makes sense. Because the louder you were, the more invisible you became. But the moment you went quiet, the world started noticing. Not because they care, but because they miss what they could no longer use. You became valuable the moment you became unavailable. And that's the game they never expected you to win. They'll keep asking, "Why are you so distant now?" They'll act confused, like they didn't hear every silent scream you gave before the silence, like they weren't the ones who forced you to become your own protector. They'll say you switched up, that you changed, and they'll be right, but for the wrong reasons. You didn't become cold overnight. It took years of being the warmest person in the room only to be left in the dark. It took years of pouring into others until you had nothing left to give yourself. That silence they hear now, that's just the sound of you reclaiming your energy. That's the echo of all the boundaries you should have set sooner. And when they finally realize that you're not silent because you're weak, but because you're strong enough to walk away without a scene, that's when the regret creeps in. That's when they start hearing everything you never said. And by then, it's too late, because silence has no rewind button. You ever notice how silence changes the air? How it shifts the atmosphere? That's because silence is presence. It demands attention without raising its voice. It makes people sit with what they did, with what they lost. When you're silent, they don't hear your words. They hear their actions. They start replaying every conversation, every moment, every dismissal. And suddenly, they see the pattern. They see that they were the villain in a story where you only tried to be the healer. But don't wait for that realization. Don't sit around hoping for growth that may never come. Your silence isn't just for them. It's for you. To heal, to rebuild, to focus on what actually deserves your voice. Because you don't owe noise to a world that profits off your pain. You don't owe softness to people who hardened you. You owe yourself peace. And peace doesn't come from being understood. It comes from not needing to be. And when the silence gets heavy, and it will, remember this: it's not emptiness, it's space. Space for you to hear your own thoughts. Space for you to finally grow without interruption. Space for you to replace survival with strategy. And when people finally start noticing the silence, when they start asking what's going on, don't break it just to explain yourself. Let them sit in their confusion. Let them feel the shift. Because the ones who really mattered, they felt the silence long before it grew loud. They saw the cracks before the collapse. They asked questions when you went quiet the first time. The others, let them learn the hard way. Let them choke on the absence. Because when you were loud, they ignored you. But now that you're silent, now they can't stop hearing what they thought you'd never stop saying.